Welcome to An Epiphany with Tiffany. My name is Tiffany, and I've just had an epiphany. This podcast is all about Christian singles looking for community. Christian dating can be quite a mess these days. I'll share stories from my guests and practical tips for successful love. Dating shouldn't be this hard, right? So grab your favorite snack or drink and curl up with this episode, and you might just have an epiphany of your own. All right. So if you want to just kind of give me like a quick intro, who you are, how long you've been a believer, and whatever else you want to share.
Certainly. So my name is Tyrone Barnes, colloquially to most people. That's not my legal name, but that's the name that I like to share. Uh, I've been I've been raised in the church, but I really rediscovered my faith and started taking it seriously when I went to college in a very liberal environment while my faith was challenged left and right by some very hostile sources that I can speak of. Oddly, it's around the same time that I started taking steps towards something that could be considered a dating life around that same time. So they kind of
Hmm.
coincided with each other in a lot of ways, but obviously it's the faith that won out over the romance, and that's good in more ways than one.
Hmm.
Uh, Aside from that, I live in the Southern Maryland area near DC. I'm like 30, 40 minutes away from our nation's capital.
Okay.
And I guess other relevant things would be that I'm 36 years old as of last October. Anything else you want to know, I'm sure that will come to fruition over the course of the conversation.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's nice to officially meet you. And thank you for joining me on this and being willing to wait it out because I kept having to cancel on you. So I really, really appreciate your willingness to still join in. So, yeah. Okay. Well, I'm just gonna jump right on in. And one of the questions that your response kind of made me go, huh, was a security question. And so it was, what does security and safety in a relationship look like to you? So if you kind of want to expand on what you said, and if you don't remember exactly, that's fine
It's been
too.
some time since
Yeah,
I
that's
wrote that
totally
questionnaire a couple of months, so yeah, I probably not recall what I said
okay.
then, and it may be a different answer now. I don't know. I have to back at it.
No worries. If you want to just answer the question right out, off the top of your head, then that's fine too.
I would appreciate a recollection of what I did originally put, and I'll use that as a springboard for anything to see if
Okay.
it tries it with anything I would say differently now.
Yeah, so you said each person is mature and trusting enough to relax in each other's taste, but also respectful enough to not go out of one's way to act in an untrustworthy manner.
Yes. So there's some pedestrian wisdom to all of that, I would find. Trust is absolutely essential to any relationship. I think anybody, whether Christian or non-Christian alike, would recognize that. Even in our relationship with God, faith, which is his word for trust, is absolutely essential to that relationship.
Mhm.
So that obviously is something that I think in just practical reasons I would hold in very high regard and in very high esteem. Aside from that, I find that I do recognize the value of relationships, but I'm also the sort of person who also values every single person's autonomy in that
Mm,
in that relationship. You should not sacrifice yourself for the sake of the relationship. If you have to, then that's not the relationship where you belong. In a way, it's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole in that sort of way. If you have to give up your nature in order for the relationship to work, then you're in the wrong place. I
mhm,
find. So I think that's what I was referring to when I said that. Would I say anything different? I understand from my angle and being in the relationships that I've been in, good and bad,
mhm,
the ones where I felt most comfortable is the ones where I did not have to make radical, drastic, unnecessary changes in order for accommodation to take place.
mhm,
Now, of course, I do find that in relationships in general, they are the sorts of things that tend to change people. I don't think anyone who ever enters into a very fulfilling or worthwhile or edifying relationship comes out the same person from that, even after a couple of days or
mhm,
even after one encounter in many ways. I constantly remind myself of that verse that as iron sharpens iron, so does one sharpen another. I think that's somewhere in Proverbs. And it doesn't even insinuate that that's always a comfortable process.
mhm,
It's that's a process that all but necessarily entails friction, discomfort, little bit of pain.
Mm-hmm.
That's one hard truth I've had to learn to accept from my last relationship, that there really is no such thing as a painless relationship. So if you're not ready to handle at least a little bit of emotional pain, then you're not even ready for a relationship yet. That's one of the things that I've had to learn.
I would agree with that. That is so true. I think that that's where a lot of us when we were younger, maybe, or for myself or for myself especially, we had this like, or I had this like grandiose idea of what a relationship was going to be like and how it was going to be all sunshine and rainbows and like there wasn't going to be any conflict or anything like that. And then I quickly realized that is completely inaccurate. But in that, when I look back on the relationships that I have had, I see how much I have grown. And it's like, oh, okay, you grow through that conflict. You grow through the hard times, even if you didn't expect it. It's kind of like what I'm trying to say.
Mm, yes, and oftentimes progress is only visible in hindsight. More often than not, I find
Mm,
the
hmm
only time I can see how far I've come is when I look back and see the steps behind me. Uh, Oftentimes, if you just keep yourself fixated on the present, as good as that may be, it's hard to see where the progress is. But when you take a look at the progress, that, for me at least, motivates me to keep on going despite all the hardships that I've dealt with.
hmm Yeah, I would totally agree. I think that well, for me, just a little background on me, I tend to at the ending of the year slash beginning of the year, reflect back, which is kind of what most people do. But there are also a certain times throughout the year where I'll take like a couple of days and look at where I'm at currently in that moment and then where I was at the beginning of, that month or even the week sometimes because there are some weeks where growth is very evident and it's like, okay, can I take a reset for a second? But anyway, I think when we don't take that time to actually reflect and look back, we can get stuck. We don't realize how much we've actually gone through or how much little things have changed because I think sometimes we get stuck on looking for like the big moments and how um you know how God is going to change like this big thing when in reality it's all the little things that are leading up to those quote big moments. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes absolutely perfect
Yeah.
sense. It aligns very much with my own personal experience, even in my prayer life.
Mm,
Last year, especially, it was a very tumultuous year for me. There
mm,
were lots of peaks and troughs, highs and lows. I had some of the best moments in that year. I had some of the worst moments in that year.
mm-hmm,
And those like epiphanous moments can seem like places where most progress take place, but it's when I stop and like look back at my prayer journal, for example, and
mm.
I look back and say prayers that I offered up in March, and then I check back on them in August, and absent-mindedly I realized like, wow, he actually answered that favorably, and I didn't even notice.
Yep.
I think there's something to be said about the value in God operating clandestinely through, outside the peripherals of our observation,
Mm.
because, what right does the single thread of the tapestry have to ask of the grand weaver how the design is going?
Oh my
In a
gosh.
sense,
Yes.
is that at times it's a very, very humbling thing to
hmm
recognize that we're just part of a much, much, much grander design that we can even begin to comprehend.
Mm.
And I know this is a bit nerdy, but I've had a bit of an interest in studying like astrophysics and
Okay.
planetary forms and stuff like that. And oftentimes it can be a little bit terrifying, looking at these huge masses moving around in these violent manners and all of this intense heat and pressure and speed that no living thing could ever survive in.
hmm
And when I look at all that, it does seem to give me a bit of a sense of, I think, what C.S. Lewis called dread. But then there's that quiet voice in the back of my head going, remember who arranged all this?
hmm
And it brings a peace beyond all understanding, as he said.
Yeah, it's it's wild to think about it from that perspective. We don't think about all of that all the time. Because we're just here on Earth and surviving. And but I find myself too, like when ever I've like been around the ocean or I'm just sitting out underneath the stars, it's like, what? I have those moments of going, you are so small and tiny compared to the grand scheme of what God has done in this
Mhm.
universe. And yeah, thank you for mentioning tapestry because that is a huge thing for me. And shameless plug, that's actually part of the title of my book that I'm working on.
Oh,
Um,
wonderful.
yeah, so I love that you kind of weaved that in there because it's a good thing to kind of remember in those, especially in the single world right now.
Mm,
That we can have people in our life that are like minor threads if you want to keep on the whole tapestry thing, right? Um, but then we have those people who are going to be a longer part of our journey, and so therefore going to be weaved throughout our life in a different way.
mm,
And I don't know, I keep finding myself reflecting on that, being single and just having these friends and like these different people who keep coming in and out of my life for the podcast in all reality. It's like what role are they playing in my life and also what
mm,
role am I playing in theirs? It might be very small and very minute, but it's still part of the grand picture of what God is doing. And so it's really kind of cool to think about it that way.
I try not to think too hard on that. I find that, I'm an artist as well, and
Yeah.
I find that I make my biggest mistakes when I start overthinking things.
Yup.
And yeah, overthinking my role in other people's lives or their role in mine or even my role in mine
Mm.
tends to make me hyper conscious of the way I'm stepping in, makes me far more likely to trip over my own toes. And
Mm-hmm.
especially in the current dating market, this is very, we both come from the 824 group, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a number of Christian dating groups on Facebook. This is the one where I seem to find like the most agitation among single Christians uh,
Yes.
compared to the other ones that I've been in and still am in even now.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I've oftentimes thought back on how it is contrasted with, say, previous generations, like our parents or grandparents' generation, and how
Mm-hmm.
finding someone seemed to come a lot more naturally, almost like something they fell into,
Yep.
while the rest of us, through conscientious action, seem to find it dang near impossible to even get a date for the weekend. And I started thinking, it's like, I kind of feel like we're centipedes relearning how to walk. Uh,
Mm.
there's that old story of the centipede with, hundreds of legs walking about just fine. And then some other insect just came out and asked, "Hey, centipede, how do you walk like that?" And
Mm-hmm.
the centipede said, "I never thought about it before." And as soon as he started thinking about it, he couldn't walk anymore. So it's like we have to go back to we things that previous generations took for granted in their
Mm-hmm.
process in finding marriage and dating relationships. We now have to be hyper conscious about in order to get back to that point where we don't have to think about it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bit of wisdom that Bruce Lee once shared that I've carried around as like just a nugget of wisdom for life. He said, "Before I began my training, a punch was just a punch and a kick was just a kick. Once I started my training, a punch was no longer just a punch, and a kick was no longer just a kick. Now that I've
Oh.
completed my training, a punch is just a punch, and a kick is just a kick." So I think we're still in that transitional period right now, not just Christians, but all of us young adults and 21st century Western civilization trying
Mm-hmm.
to relearn how to punch and kick, as it were. Whereas it seemed to come so naturally to other people, it seems like a lot of those foundational principles in our society that guided us towards healthy relationships or guided previous generations towards healthy instructed into oblivion by the powers that be, and now we've got to relearn and reconstruct them on our own, and that can get frustrating. That can get very frustrating. So I sympathize with their frustration, but I hope that in the midst of our frustration, it's written that we're not to sin in our anger. I
Mm.
hope that we're not making anything worse in the midst of our frustration, because I think a lot of us are, including if not especially Christians.
I would 100% agree with that. There are so many days where I might be scrolling the group and I'm like, why? But then I have to remind myself, I'm like, okay, you're frustrated too. They're just handling their frustration in a different way than you are. So I try and to not like prejudge the situation because sometimes, I will sit there with my girlfriends and just be like, ah, and like let it all out, but I won't necessarily post it online. Um,
Mhm.
but in some scenarios, like there are those of us who don't have those people, right? That they can just call up and
Mhm.
like unload on because, they're frustrated about this guy or this situation or whatever it may be.
Mhm.
And so I kind of have to remember that sometimes when people are posting like that, it is just because they don't have any other place to put that frustration. But on that note, I do think that there are a lot of us who aren't helping, like in the grand scheme of things, and how um we're living in a box, if you want to use that metaphor, and we don't I'm using the general we, but anyway, sometimes we struggle to get out of those boxes and actually put ourselves back out there,
Mhm.
because of whatever the hurt is, because we're not dealing with it, or whatever. I have done so much healing within myself, and um like within the community of 824, with like all of the people that I have actually met in person. So this is just a little shameless plug for anybody listening. Get out and meet people that are in 824.
Yeah.
Or just people that are in anywhere that are good people. But anyway, all that to say, it's so helpful to have that community, to be able to go to different meetups and have people all over the country that I can like reach out to if I'm having a bad day, whatever. And so I think this is probably going to end up becoming a rant, but it's fine. The I think the church struggles in this aspect, and I mean the greater church,
Yes.
but also individual churches. Like, we don't have community like for singles. um and I don't know if you've experienced that. I'm assuming you have too, like where it's non-existent in our church, and it can be so frustrating. So it makes sense that we go to online forums to like find that community you know
The church has dropped the ball horribly in this regard in many, many ways. There
hmm
is little to no guidance from our clergy elders for
hmm
people looking to get into marriage. And I want to make sure that I'm tampering my own frustration with that because I don't want to become judgmental with them. They're speaking out of ignorance.
hmm
The arena that we're operating in is in many ways unprecedented.
hmm
Back in previous generations, people basically just went to school, went to college, and just married whoever was nearby.
hmm
They operated in these small, intimate communal pools of people that they could reach out to. I think one person put it as like it was like a quasi-arranged marriage in a way because everybody knew everybody and everyone had suggestions and guidance about who should be with whom based on the compatibility that they could observe from firsthand
hmm
experience and stuff like that. We're not living in those kind of communal ponds anymore. We're all stuck in this one giant digital ocean
hmm
where if I as a guy find, the cute girl next door, I'm not just competing with the other boys on the block. I'm competing with every single other guy on the internet who's just a DM away from her. And
hmm
nobody knows how to deal with that because it's unprecedented. Like, I think I said this recently in the group, like most of the clergy in most of our churches who are already married, most of those guys have not operated in any kind of dating arena since sometime between the Carter administration and the fall of the Berlin Wall. It's a completely different ball game now,
hmm
and nobody could have prepared us for it.
hmm
That's I think that ties into the whole thing about us being centipedes relearning how to walk in a lot of ways because a lot of those things that they just took for granted, they're no longer there for us. And so we got to relearn a few things. And there's a number of angles you could go about that. I could go about it from the legal angle, from the societal angle, from the economic angle, from the social angle, the civil angle. There's a number of ways you could go about that.
hmm
And I have in various talks. And I think I'm starting to like flick on some lights in people's heads
Oh.
about things that I've uncovered as I just sit back frustrated. What's going on here is basically what I keep on asking. Because you look at the statistics for relationships in the Western civilization, it's not pretty. It's
Mm-mm.
not pretty at all, whether Christian or non-Christian. I read somewhere that people born in the 90s now, uh, only about maybe a little over 30% of them are married, which is like well less than half of previous generations at the same time they were that age. Now,
Mhm.
reminder to everybody listening to this, 1990 was 35 years ago. Hard to imagine. I know.
I know.
I'm an 88 baby. Okay. I'm a 90s kid.
Yeah.
That's hard for me to hear. So it
Mm-hmm.
means that people who were born in the 90s are today either in their mid to late 20s or early to mid 30s.
Mm-hmm.
Little over 30% of them are married,
Mm-hmm.
which is unprecedentedly low. And the funny thing is, it's not just marriage rates that have gotten dangerously low like this. People are getting involved in serious relationships at lower rates than
Yeah.
ever before. People are even hooking up at lower rates than ever before. Even sex has happened at lower rates than ever before, and not for good reasons. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think I read somewhere that, like, what is it, like 33% of men between the ages of 18 and 30 are virgins. Now, at first glance, that seems like a good thing, but it's not for the good reasons. Like, they're not virgins like I am. Okay.
Right.
I'm a virgin by choice.
Yeah.
It's not because I've never had the opportunity. I have. It's not because I don't have the desire. I do. It's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
These guys are virgins because they've lost the opportunity. And I don't think there's any virtue in not doing something that you never had the opportunity to do in the first place.
Mm.
I also don't think there's any virtue in not doing something that you never had the desire to do. As
Mm.
an example, I'm a teetotaler. I don't drink at all.
Okay, yeah.
I don't consider that a virtue because I
Right.
don't have the desire to drink. I can't stand the smell or the taste of liquor. Someone who's a recovering alcoholic who hasn't had a drink in the last 6 months, that man has far more virtue than I have as a man who's never had a drink in the last 3, 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an assessment of the situation, and that's one of the things that was served as the catalyst to me going up and throwing up my hands, going, "What's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
Why is this happening? Why is it that we seem to be through digital media more connected than ever before, and yet so lonely?" Uh, that's just a number of those, Zen-like quest riddles that we ask, and I
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm starting to flick on some lights for myself and for others, but
Yeah.
it's a slow process because people who are frustrated tend to be hard of hearing. And a lot of
Yes.
people are very, very frustrated. So a lot of people are very hard of hearing.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, so I'm curious what like light bulbs are you switching on for yourself and or others?
So I'll phrase that as a question like, what's something I know now that I wish I had known in my younger years? Like,
Yeah.
when I came across like this information, it's like, man, why didn't I learn that like 20 years ago? But I'll start with what, from my perspective, seems to be the lower hanging fruit in that regard.
Mm.
So, one hard fact that I wish I had known sooner: being virtuous and being attractive have nothing to do with each other.
Hmm. Okay.
I wish that wasn't the case,
Yeah.
but it's abundantly clear that that is the case. And I think of, there are countless people, men and women, who are very, very high in virtue, very caring, very selfless, very loving, very courageous, who are at the same time very lonely and very unsuccessful.
Mm.
And you say those words out loud, pity may come upon you, but then you look at them and ask them, do you find this person attractive? Most of them would say no. Case in point, Mahatma Gandhi was a very virtuous man.
Yes.
Very, very brave, very courageous, self-sacrificing, humble, loved the people, gave his all for a higher cause. No, there are a million and two things you could say with regard to the content of his character as a virtuous person.
Mm-hmm.
Get a cabal of 100 randomly selected women and ask them how many of them would find Mahatma Gandhi attractive as a man.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
You may get some oddballs here and there, but I don't think we're going to be seeing photos of Gandhi on the cover of Men's Health anytime soon.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
hmm
Yeah.
And the opposite is also true. There are
Mm-hmm.
countless men, and I'm not the first to make this observation by a long shot. There are people, even in the secular world.
Mm.
One guy I listen to quite often, like with a grain of salt, is Michael Sartain, who's not a Christian, but he is a life coach for a lot of men who are struggling in their dating lives, rich and poor, young and old. And even in his secular perspective, he has said on more than one occasion that he has come across many men, because he lives a pretty high life out in Vegas. He constantly goes out
Mm-hmm.
with like top of the line Maxim models and hanging out in those kinds of nightclub arenas. He says oftentimes that he has come across scores of men who, in terms of the content of their character, he would regard as completely irredeemable scoundrels who
Mm.
have had perfectly consensual relations with more highly attractive and desirable women than most guys will meet over the course of their entire life. At the same time, he has met and personally coached countless other men who, in terms of the content of their character, are good,
Mm-hmm.
honest, upstanding men of real character who have not had a single romantic or intimate partner in the last 4 or 5 years, and
Mm-hmm.
not for lack of trying.
Mm-hmm.
So I know, especially, in Christian circles, we constantly talk about how to improve your standing in the dating arena. You got to improve your virtue and walk with God. But look, Jesus was closer to God than anybody, and he never married.
Mm-hmm.
He was God, in fact. That's how close he was. Nor
Mm-hmm.
did any of his disciples, nor did the Apostle Paul.
Right.
So that really is secured to me. Like, if you're trying to improve your mating and dating chances, virtue has nothing to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. That doesn't mean it's something you ought not do. But I've analogized it to this way. It's like if someone comes to you and says, I'm having a lot of trouble with my car. It won't start up. I have to work the key and push down on both pedals at the same time in order to even have a hope of it starting up. And when it
Mm-hmm.
does, it breaks down every 45 minutes to an hour. And when it does that, I have to spend another 2 hours getting it back up. What do I do? And then someone answers that by saying, okay, what you need to do is you need to weigh yourself on a bathroom scale.
Mm-hmm.
However much you weigh in pounds, cut that number in half. That's how many ounces of water you need to drink today. And you need
Right.
to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Okay, those are good things to do, but that has nothing to do with the problem I just brought up.
Mm-hmm.
Getting better sleep and better hydration is not going to fix my car. And
Mm-hmm.
being practicing your virtue, while a good thing to do, has nothing to do with improving your chances in dating.
Mm.
It's hard to hear, and I wish more elderly Christian leaders would recognize and say that outright because it's hard to even get that across to some people in my family about
Mm.
how true that is, but it's a fact, and
Yeah.
not realizing that is jeopardizing us.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I'm just curious, like, what you think needs to be the opposite of that. Like, how do you, quote, help yourself in the dating world?
Well, this may also be a little bit hard to hear, but a part of me is starting to recognize that when it comes to our mating and dating strategies and behaviors, we are in a lot of ways just hairless apes. And we need to stop pretending as though I'm not endorsing like Darwinism or anything like that.
Right, 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 yeah.
We're not the only things on this earth that mate. Okay,
Mm,
animals do that as well. And there's a lot of parallels between animal behavior that are informative of human behavior. And depending on whether you're a man or a woman, it does depend on what you can do in order to improve your standings. Generally speaking, for the most part, women improve their dating market value by improving, first and foremost, their visible attractiveness, because
mm,
that signals a lot of things that are important to a male partner with regard to their capacity for reproduction. For men, most of us improve our dating and mating value by improving our how visibly competent we are.
mm,
That's one. There are a lot of asymmetries between the sexes about how we operate in dating.
mm-hmm,
A lot of asymmetry. We're not one and one. Contrary to what some modern schools of thought would like to say, we're not interchangeable. And there are a lot of things that are like hard written into our biology as to how we're to operate in such ways. So that's one of the things that I came about. I sort of lost my train of thought right there, but I hope that serves as a catalyst
It's
for
okay.
anything you have.
Um, yeah, I think that I have lots of thoughts going on, so I'm trying to like put them into a concise question. Um, but I guess okay, this is the question I want to ask. Like, what do you like in with that knowledge and like your understanding of that? Like, what do you say to like say you have a friend, girl, that's a girl, female friend
Mhm.
that like, has a strong belief that, men are supposed to pursue, men are supposed to do this laundry list of things, right? Because we have them, like we have our list of things.
Mhm.
So with that like lens that you have, like what would you say to her in if she's getting like frustrated that like men are not doing those things?
There's a number of things I would say. First of all, it's perfectly understandable that women have all these standards. In fact, I consider it something of a good thing.
Yeah.
Uh, I get a lot of flack of this from my unbelieving friends, but I genuinely believe this.
Hmm.
Society and civilization at large functions a lot better when it is not easy for men to be sexually gratified. And I mean a lot. It always has. That's not to say it should be impossible
Mm-hmm.
or unreasonably difficult,
Right.
but it definitely should never be easy. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the advances that we've made as a species were due to some guy out there trying to position himself to get a woman. Uh, the pyramids, indoor plumbing, space travel, the internet,
Right.
architecture, all of those things came about because some guy was trying to be selective enough for a woman,
Mm.
in my judgment. So I would first edify her to say that, yeah, it's a good thing that you have all these standards and you're free to choose whatever standards you want. With that said, you need to pay attention to what kind of feedback the standards you are establishing are giving back to you. Are you
Mm-hmm.
getting what you want as a result of setting those boundaries and standards, or are you not? And if so, is there an adjustment you can make in your standards in order to make that happen? So let's take, for example, the idea of pursuit.
Okay.
Again, I do not think that this is something unique to our society or our civilization. This seems to be something that's universal,
Okay.
culturally universal, even somewhat biologically universal. This seems to be consistent even across non-human species. That the males are supposed to be the initiators of the mating process,
Right.
generally speaking, because it is the females who select. Like that's just how the order is. And
Mm-hmm.
I oftentimes say that to say that, women have a lot more weight to swing around as to how the order of society is arranged in many ways. I oftentimes hear women say that they're frustrated with men who lie, who cheat, who are dishonest, who are players and are bad boys, etc. And
Mm-hmm.
every time I listen to those kinds of complaints, and then I take a look at the kinds of men that these women are dating or sleeping with, it's like, you're complaining about the men that you're giving validation to. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you recognize that. The reason why they're like that is because you're validating that kind of behavior with your selection processes.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, and I mean this truthfully, and I hope everyone who, especially every woman who hears this, knows this. If all you women in society got together and signed a blood pact that you are never going to give any more attention or validation to another bad boy, another criminal, another guy with antisocial personality disorder, another guy with borderline personality disorder, another cheater, another liar, another unreliable character, another guy who gives you an emotional roller coaster but can never be trusted or treats you bad. And if you held to that conviction, those sorts of men would vanish from the face of the earth within a generation or two
Hmm.
because they're not being selected anymore.
Hmm.
That's a major reason why.
Okay.
So that's the role that women can keep in mind as they go about their selection processes. Like pay attention to the men that you're giving attention to.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully you can open your eyes up to the men that maybe you haven't paid attention to, because that's kind of a scary thing that I've also learned. That it seems like the female brain is wired to filter out undesirable men to the point of annihilation
Hmm.
almost. It's kind of scary. When I first heard of this, I thought that this was some ridiculous red pill, black pill nonsense that they were talking. But there were
Yeah.
like brainwave studies conducted that examine women's brainwaves when they look into a crowd of men and segregate the attractive ones from the unattractive ones.
Uh-huh.
There's certain circuitry in the brain that activates when you recognize another member of your own species. Okay. When women catch a man that is undesirable enough that it does not spark any attraction in them, that circuitry of the brain does not activate.
Hmm.
Their brains, at least, even if they don't say this out consciously, their brains, like the primitive lower animal parts of their brains, literally see those men as subhuman. Scary thought. And I thought, yeah, again, I had the same reaction, like that cannot possibly be true. You got to be
Right.
like. But there was even some street experiments done on this. A couple of young women who were skeptical of this discovery, and a counselor who was walking with them, they were standing on some open, busy street, and he gestured at some guy standing over a ways and said, "Okay, what would you rate that guy over there?" And they said, "What guy?" He gestured at him again. "That guy right over there, what would you rate him?" And they say, "What guy? Is he behind the mailman?" And the counselor says, "No, he is the mailman. The mailman is a guy. What would you rate him?" And they go, "Oh, we thought you meant like a guy."
Uh,
They didn't even recognize that he was there as a man because he
whoa.
had a blue collar like that. So again, this seems to be hard written into our biology, but let's get back to the whole thing of pursuit, because I
Right.
think that's important. I do agree that it is incumbent upon men to be the initiators, but the way that we're going about it now, especially now in our current environment, it's become like an uphill battle for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of guys. And I think there's this one fellow by the name of Dr. Orion Taraban, whose book I'm reading right now. He calls this the dating double bind
Mm.
for men in the modern world. And what this means is that it's reflective of the fact that there has never been a single society or civilization anywhere in the world where marriage was recognized as an institution in which women were expected to initiate. Never
Mm-hmm.
happened, ever. So men have always, like, as a cultural universal, expected to be the initiators. Now, with that said, it's also understood generally that if a man does not do anything, does not make any kind of initiating action, nothing happens.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any given man can sit by himself at a bar, for example, night after night, week after week, month after month. Nobody will even speak to him.
Mm-hmm.
Most women, it's quite the opposite experience. They can passively garner options without doing anything, especially if she's exceptionally attractive. She cannot do anything at all and get guys sliding into her DMs, trying to buy her drinks or food or whatever, offering themselves as options without
Mm-hmm.
her doing anything. So, generally speaking, if a man doesn't do anything, nothing happens.
Right.
At the same time, once he does express some interest, and I actually had this conversation in the group recently, or calling it, once automatically knocks his attraction points lower than it would be if he didn't say anything at all.
Huh.
Because this seems to be like fundamental to the nature of negotiation, is that the first person who speaks is almost always the one who loses. The one who's in the position to accept or reject the initial offer always has more weight to swing around than the one who makes the initial offer.
Mm.
So this is the dating double bind. If a man doesn't do anything, nothing happens. Once he
Mm-hmm.
does something, once he says something, once he expresses interest, once he makes himself available, because we as human beings have this tendency to attach value to scarcity. If it's less available, we think it's worth more.
Mm-hmm.
So as he makes himself more available, it seems to trigger into the brain that he's not as valuable as he would be if he didn't say anything. But if he doesn't say anything, nothing happens. There's an old Groucho Marx line that says, "I would never want to be part of a club that would have me as a member." And it seems like that's becoming a bit of a subconscious conviction now.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just one among many reasons why a lot of modern men today have given up in their active pursuit, because it seems to be a Sisyphean task, uh, a, a constantly losing battle. And maybe one thing I would ask as a bit of a challenge to women who are frustrated with the lack of pursuit in their lives, I would ask them, of the men who have pursued you, how many times did you reciprocate on their interests?
Mm-hmm.
How many times did you take them up on an offer for a date? How many times did you at least give them your phone number or your IG handle or your Discord username or whatever the case may be?
Mm-hmm.
If the answer is mostly no, then you may have a clue as to why they've stopped pursuing. It's lack of reciprocation. It doesn't seem like their actions are producing any kind of reward. And our brains are hardwired with a reward system. We're fundamentally engineered to reserve our scarce resources, including our energy. So if
Mm-hmm.
we find that our efforts are not producing a reward, a part of our brain will tell us, stop doing that. Stop wasting your time and energy on that because you're not getting anything out of it. So that's just one among many reasons why the lack of pursuit has come about. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to know what I would say to men who are feeling that frustration, we can get into that. But at least that's what I would say to women who are having the frustration with the lack of pursuit.
Mm-hmm. That was going to be my next question. Was going to be like, now what would you say to men on the other side? Because for a lot of my friends and myself included, like we have had attraction grow with different men. Like
Hmm.
I'm a very personality girl. Like if you have a great personality, to me, that's what I'm interested in right off the bat. Now, yes, are there some men who I find more attractive than others? Yes, because that's just fact.
That's
But
selection.
yeah, that's selection. But like in that, there have been men that I have dated that at first glance I was like, I don't know about you. I mean, okay, maybe, but it wasn't like an utter no, you know? And then as I got to know them, their personality came out and I was like, okay, no, I find you very attractive.
Hmm.
So I know a lot of women will say that we have the opportunity to let attraction grow, and a lot of men don't. At least that's our opinion and our experience with a lot of different men. But anyway, I want to open the floor to you now to like, what would you say to men in that camp? Oops.
Yeah, yeah, that's actually very informative, and that's also opened up the gateways to some other tidbits of information that I picked up along the way. It's interesting that you said that guys that you are not initially attracted to at first glance became more attractive once you get to know them.
Yeah.
That seems to be generally true of most women in general. There's this fact about what's going on dating apps, especially that the way men assess women they don't know is radically different as in their distribution of attractiveness as to how women rate men that they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Most men consider most women to be average, slightly more or slightly above or slightly below average, and slightly less than that or significantly below or significantly above average.
Mm-hmm.
That's how men tend to rate women that they don't know.
Right.
For women, it's something like 80% of women consider 80% of men below average in attractiveness. It's yeah, men that they don't know
Oh, okay,
specifically
man, they don't know. Okay, okay, okay,
on
gotcha.
dating. Like I said, this is coming from dating apps where all you have is the little stupid
Like,
knee-jerk reaction timing uh
yes.
first glance superficial impression that you can get. That's all you can get out of those dang apps.
Right.
So it's understandable that most women would rank, probably a lot of those men that they would rank below average in attractiveness. If they got to know them, it would normalize into a better distribution that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of things that can help alleviate this is if we started meeting each other in person. I've mentioned this in a number of dating apps that probably the biggest improvement to my dating life that I made is when I started taking dance classes a little
Mm-hmm.
over 3 years ago. I've been doing Latin dance for a little over 3 years. I performed, I've competed, and like everything I've learned about relationships has come through that venue as a result. Uh, that's yeah, because now those people, the women that I come across, they can actually put a name to the face and see how I interact in person rather than something
Right.
that they're just swiping off on their phone. As for what I would advise men to do who are frustrated with their pursuit opportunities, firstly, I would recognize them to not try to be in denial about how bad the situation is. Uh,
Mm.
don't become resentful because that just makes the situation even worse. That's the first thing I always tell anybody in any bad situation.
Right.
You're in a bad spot. Granted, don't make it any worse.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing. In the arts, the realm of hell is oftentimes depicted as a bottomless pit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's insinuating to the fact that no matter how bad the situation is, there's always the high likelihood that some wicked, corrupt, uh, conceited spirit like yourself can make it a whole lot worse. So
Mm-hmm.
that's your first opportunity. Don't become resentful. Take full responsibility for your situation, which is not the same thing as taking the blame. It's not taking
Mm-hmm.
the blame. It's doing
Mm-hmm.
away with the topic of blame entirely because blame is a distraction.
Right.
Forget blame. I don't care whose fault it is. That's what taking full responsibility means. It's not saying you're not curdling in a fetal position in the corner of your house, screeching, "It's all my fault."
Right.
Okay, that sort of person is actually abdicating responsibility. Taking responsibility is saying, "I don't care whose fault it is. It's my
Mm-hmm.
problem, so here is what I'm going to do about it."
Mm-hmm.
So let's say we got a man who doesn't have a lot of option or is really struggling in his dating life. First thing that I would advise them to think of is, well, okay, how many options for dating have you managed to cultivate? And for most men, is either none or one,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a really, really bad spot to be in.
Mm-hmm.
Because a man with not a lot of options is a man who tends to be desperate, needy, clingy. He gets what we call one-itis, which is kind of an invented word. And he exhibits pretty much everything that would be an immediate turnoff to just about any self-respecting woman
Mm-hmm.
is neediness and clinginess and desperation. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would do, and I've actually said this in a number of groups, is that one of the things that the science shows is that something like 80% of female attraction is pre-selection. What that means is that any particular woman's opinion of any particular man is going to be significantly influenced by other women's opinion of that particular man. Yes. And this has been found in science, not just in humans, but in other species. For example, there were some researchers conducting studies on a colony of rats that they had in their custody. Human beings share more genetic similarities with rats and mice than we do with the apes, which is why they're using genetics experiments so often.
Right. Yes.
And during mating season, they recognized that there was this one male rat in their colony who was not getting any mating options at all. He wasn't getting any success. None of the females were interested in him, approaching him, trying to mate with him, or anything. So they saw this as a golden opportunity to try an experiment. So
Mm-hmm.
what the researchers did is that they took like one or two of the female rats with some strategically placed pheromones so that the male rat and these female rats recognize each other as family, and they placed those female rats in his pen. Immediately after that, all those other female rats who were not giving him the time of day suddenly became attracted to him and started trying to mate with him
Huh.
because now he seems pre-selected. He has some kind of social proof in a way.
Interesting.
And it's really scary how far that can carry with regard to human behavior. I've told this story a number of times to my unbelieving friends, and they couldn't even find it. They were having a hard time wrapping their heads around it. It's one of the saddest stories I know. So there was this guy, young man, not having a lot of dating options, not having a lot of success, not able to get any woman attracted to him. So he
Mm-hmm.
decided to do just one thing
Mm-hmm.
to improve his chances, and it is astounding how well this worked. All he did was put a wedding band on his finger. That's it.
What?
All he did was put on, he wasn't married. He just put a wedding band on his finger. As soon as he did that, a lot of those women who weren't giving him any attention now all of a sudden got attracted to him, going out on dates with him, one night stands, the whole kit and caboodle. And here's the sad thing. After he would have their encounter with these women and he revealed to them that he wasn't actually married, they would get visibly frustrated and disappointed
Oh,
because it means he's not as pre-selected as they thought. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's one of those things that when I first heard that story, I was like, okay, if all the people in this collective mass of this narrative had one collective face, so I could smack it right now, because that is like I understand from like an animal standpoint why you would behave that way, but what is wrong with you people? That
Yeah.
it is crazy when we let those things get out of control. But it just solidified that, yeah, one of the ways in which a man can improve his standing is to generally go out and make honest platonic friends with as many women as possible. Don't try to sleep with them. Don't try to ask them out on dates. Don't try to attract them. Just get connected with them and let them get familiar with you.
Mm.
Eventually, one of them is going to get attracted to you. And once that happens, it's going to open up the floodgates to more and more attraction that way. As many dating coaches have come up with this quippy little bit of wisdom: the more women like you, the more women like you.
You're blowing my mind right now. I mean, this is interesting because I mean, I have like a ton of guy friends, but
Mm,
in my mind, I'm over here like, okay, if I'm not attracted to you, I'm thinking of all of my girlfriends that I like want to set that person up with. You know what I mean? But I have to know that man first of all, right? To like
yes.
be able to be like, hey, he's a good one, or he is not a good one, stay away. So
Mm-hmm.
like, and that's how I think about it. And majority of the women that I am personally friends with, that's tend to be how we think about it. So I'm curious to now know like if it is really more quote animalistic and we don't realize it's happening, or if it's just kind of like maybe personality or like I don't know. I have to think about this one for a while
Mm-hmm.
now.
Yeah, a lot of our primal instincts operate on the unconscious level.
Yeah.
A lot of our brain's activity is unconscious. I think it's like 70 or 80% of our brain activity is unconscious. We're
Hmm.
not consciously thinking of the things that we're doing and saying and thinking a lot of the time. Like the fact that we're able to have this conversation in the first place, there's a lot of pre-existing assumptions going on, even in this conversation right now, that we're not conscientiously thinking of. We came
It's
into
true.
this conversation understanding that we're both fluent in English, eloquent, able to have a civil discussion about difficult topics without it becoming heated.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody said that out loud, but we all just came into it subconsciously assuming it.
That's
That's
true.
reflective. It's like we're fish becoming cognizant of the water we're swimming in all of a sudden,
Mm.
and it's a scary thing when that happens. You teeter on the edge of having an existential crisis when you do that, but it's healthy if you know how to master it.
Yeah, I agree. And it just makes me think like how we as like to get back to the topic at hand, being singles, like what do we do about it? Like
Mm,
how do we navigate this now, like with the different knowledge and stuff that we all have, and like where does the middle ground meet? Because like I really
mm,
think that there is a for me personally, I really think that there is a huge spiritual like warfare aspect as to why a bazillion of us are not married right now. And obviously,
mm.
that's an exaggeration on the bazillion part, but the majority of our, like millennial and early Gen Zers are not married, right? And so when I think about that from that perspective, it's like, what are we doing as believers if we're saying we're walking with the Lord and we're doing all of this stuff?
Mhm,
Why can't we get it together? Why can't we figure it out? Like, why can't we see that there are a lot of options?
mhm.
What is stopping us? Why are we putting everybody and God in a box? Those are just questions that I have and I think about daily.
I have thought about them for long stretches of time myself, and I do find that a lot of the answers that I've come to is a lot of the same answers that a lot of other young Christians in my age bracket have come to. I
Mhm.
find that in a lot of ways, especially us, millennial and Gen Z Christians, we are in the middle of trying to undo a lot of the damage that a previous generation of Christians did to us in raising us. I
Mhm.
think that a lot of us were raised in a kind of fear of relationships in a lot of ways. And I think that's mainly a byproduct of our parents' generation overcompensating for the mistakes they made during the sexual revolution of the late 60s and the 70s.
Mhm.
They realized the cataclysmic mistakes that they made during that tumultuous time in Western civilization. And now they're trying to swing to the opposite extreme and make sure that we do not make any of those mistakes. And now we've become so dysfunctional to the point that
Mhm.
we don't even know how to talk to each other anymore. And they're
It's true.
wondering, why are you guys not married? It's like, well, we've never had the opportunity to develop those skill sets. There's a
Mhm.
book that I have on my shelf that I'm probably going to pick up reading again, just on that shelf over there, in fact, that I'm
Mhm.
probably going to pick up and read again this year. It's titled Courtship in Crisis. Now, I can't
Oh,
remember the author's name. He's a Christian, and it's largely a response to what was very tragically a very popular book during the late 90s when we were being raised, which was Joshua Harris's I Kissed Dating Goodbye.
yep.
If I had to pin the lion's share of the damage to our mating and dating and marriage prospects to any one particular publication, it would be that one,
Mhm.
because that did a very good job at appealing to the sensibilities of our mothers and previous generations, but it has done such irreparable damage to
Mhm.
our relationship capacities to us as young Christians. And I think probably the biggest failure state of that entire book's teaching is the author himself.
Mhm.
Joshua Harris himself wound up ultimately divorcing his wife, leaving his children, and probably most tragically, he wound up apostatizing. He doesn't
Mhm.
even consider himself a Christian anymore.
Mhm.
So that's a strong catalyst to, or a strong reason to believe that that's probably not the path we need to pursue anymore. But
Yeah.
this guy, this author of A Courtship in Crisis, he wrote that book precisely because he saw the fallout of those kinds of teachings. And what was interesting is that when Harris's book started gaining popularity,
Mhm.
this author's grandparents came to him and said, "Honey, I don't think that's a good idea."
Right.
This guy in I Kiss Dating Goodbye said that's not a really good idea. Now, of course, his grandparents came from a generation in which dating and marrying was much healthier.
Mhm.
And what actually the subtitle that he wrote for this book is The Case for Traditional Dating. So
Ooh.
after seeing the cataclysm and the crisis of dating and mating and marriage among young Christians, this author decided to sit down with his grandmother, who had been married for like, I think, 60 plus years until her husband passed away. He decided to take his grandmother out for dinner and sit down with her and have a hard conversation and ask her, what exactly was dating and getting married like in your day? So this was
Mm.
like 30s, 40s, 50s, maybe.
Mhm.
And the way she described it is that, first of all, there seems to be have been a shift in use of terminology that we have to get off the ground. What we now call dating is what used to be called going steady,
Yes.
which I don't think anybody has unironically used outside of an Archie comic since circa 1972. Like
Right.
nobody uses that phrase anymore, but it refers to exclusively seeing someone in a committed relationship. So we now say Bob and Janie have been dating for 2 months. They used to say Bob and Janie have been going steady for 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
What used to be called dating, because they didn't have a term for dating, but it doesn't refer to what we call it now. What used to be called dating is what we now rather pejoratively call playing the field,
Oh.
where you're going out with people, you're seeing people, but you're not getting involved in any serious committed relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the norm in his grandmother's day, believe it or not. In fact, it was
Wow.
encouraged to
Just
not
go out.
to just go out, not have any serious ties or commitments to anyone. In fact, his grandmother stated that when she started getting interested in boys and started wanting to go out to date, her parents, meaning the author's great grandparents, really only had three rules for her.
Uh-huh.
Only three. One, don't date the same guy twice in a row.
Hmm.
Two, don't date the same guy more than 5 times in total.
What?
Three, be home by 10.
That's it?
That's it.
Whoa.
And the guiding principle behind all of this, all of these rules and stipulations was don't get too serious too soon.
Soon.
That's what I think is what the Bible was teaching us when it says do not awaken love before its due time, in a way.
Hmm.
Is don't get too serious too soon. So what that kind of dating arena did is because it wasn't so serious, because it was deliberately kept casual,
Right.
people were able to learn about themselves, about their communities, about the pool of options that they had around them, what kind of person they were compatible with or not compatible with, without the cataclysmic pressure and weight of a serious relationship pushing them into forms and shapes that they were not ready for. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, he quotes his grandmother in the book saying, she actually said that if she had only dated like 4 or 5 guys, she would have had no idea what she wanted in a husband.
Mm.
Now, that's her own saying. And she did have a very successful marriage that lasted until death for
Right.
60 plus years. So, where did all that go? And he does chart this in the book. Again, the title of the book is Courtship in Crisis, The Case for Traditional Dating. He, much like I insinuated earlier, he lays this at the feet of the sexual revolution, where people, Western society made the cataclysmic mistake of introducing sex into dating.
Right.
I don't care what certain schools of thought would like to say. Sex makes things more serious.
Yeah.
It does, whether you
Yeah.
want it to be or not. I don't think there is a such thing as casual sex. That is a contradiction in terms as far as I'm concerned. No such thing.
Mm-hmm.
So when they introduced sex into dating, that made dating too serious. The whole reason why previous generations dating went so well is because it wasn't serious. Now you've introduced sex into it, whether you want to believe it or not. Take all your, day after pills, your birth control pills, and your condoms and whatever. You've made things more serious now. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And indeed, I have something to say about all those kinds of measures. I honestly think, like, look, I say this oftentimes to young women, like, if before you decide to sleep with a man, the first thing you do is take every measure to make sure that he does not become the father of your children, that's
Yep.
probably a strong indicator you should not be having sex with them.
Mm-hmm.
Just a thought.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that said, the mistake that the sexual revolution made was introducing sex to marriage. What this I Kiss Dating Goodbye, courtship, Puritan, post revolutionary Christian circles have done is that they made dating even more serious.
Mm-hmm.
And that just doubled down on that terrible mistake. Now, a dating relationship is treated as something of a quasi marriage to a lot of people. And you don't even know this person yet. And that's what
Right.
a lot of people who have gone through the I Kiss Dating Goodbye program, those who did end up in marriage, the consequence of everyone who has followed that book's teachings is either A, they don't get married like us, or B, they end up in completely broken and unstable marriages that don't last.
Right.
And one of the reasons is they have not gone through the process that, say, this author's grandparents went through, where they were given the opportunity to learn and grow in a safe, secure, and non-serious environment about what kind of person they would want to be with and what kind of person they need to become in order to be with them.
Mm.
We have been denied that crucible field.
Mm-hmm.
That has been taken from us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only like maybe I want to say in the last 6 or 7 years that I finally stepped into that arena and started learning the things that I know now. And that's to answer your question, what can we do about this?
Yeah.
I would recommend that we start doing what we can to facilitate that kind of environment where we're not getting too serious too soon. Like, I do believe, you're dating for marriage, that's fine, but that does not mean that every single person you date is your wife or husband to be. Don't
Right.
go into that relationship with that heavy burden right on your shoulders at the get-go. Neither of you are ready to carry something that heavy just yet.
Yes.
Keep it non-serious, keep it casual, let yourself grow and develop and learn. Then you'll be ready for that. That's one of the things that I would say. I know it's a little bit vague and a little bit up in the air, but hopefully there's something concrete in there that someone can grab onto as to what they can do as a next step to make this a little bit better for everybody involved.
Yeah, no, I think that was a very great explanation of like all the things. And but you tied it up really well. I was tracking the whole time. So I so this is where I'm gonna plug again going out and meeting people because yes, I have seen a couple of relationships like happen because of different meetups and
Mhm.
stuff and then like getting involved in that community. Um and whatnot. And so, and one of them is close to getting engaged. So, yay. So it's just like, okay, see, we can do this. We just need
We
to
can.
do it. Just
Mhm.
do the thing, like get out there and take the pressure off. I think that's the other big part that I'm gonna take away from what you said is there's too much pressure. There's so
Mhm.
much pressure. And
Yeah.
I read I Kiss Getting By. He had a second one. There was a
Yeah, I
second.
think he did a follow-up where he basically recanted almost everything he said in there.
Yeah. No, there was another I'll have to look it up later. There was
Mhm.
two books that I read that were like on the same topic or similar
Mhm.
topics. But anyway, doesn't matter. Did a whole lot of great good. I'm still single at 35. Yay. Um
36.
woo, yay 80s babies. So anyway, all that to say, it's just I part of the reason why I wanted to do this podcast, the women think and then now the men think is to actually start having these conversations
Mm.
and realize that a lot of us are in a similar boat,
Mhm.
more so than we thought we were, right?
Yes.
Um, and then maybe in the hope that like something can come of that, like whether that is all of us individually kind of figure it out or like some of us do, and I don't know, like I'm leaving that up to God to see like what He's gonna do through this, but um, yeah, I think it's just important to have those conversations and to actually sit and listen, to what the other side has to say.
That's one thing. No,
Yeah.
that's like I said, I've had talks like that in the group where I think I'm starting to make breaches across the aisle. I
Mhm.
think some of like the strongest insights that I've given were given to women, and much to my surprise, even though they seemed a little bit critical, they were very well received. I'll say again, 824 is kind of a hostile territory
Yeah.
right now. You've probably seen this more than I have. There's a lot of divide going on in there, and a lot of hostility going on in there, and it's hard to turn on the light without turning up the heat
Mhm.
oftentimes in there. But I've had a couple of instances where it seems like I'm starting to get through to people.
Mhm.
Some people have gotten through to me, and I'm definitely grateful for that. So hopefully more of that can build up. Things like, okay, I'm a woman who's very financially successful, but I don't want to intimidate guys. What do I do about that? Or I have this guy who says that he's interested in me, but he hasn't said a word to me. Even though we're scheduled for a date, he hasn't said a word to me in like 3 or 5 days. What am I supposed to make of that? I've come in and
Mm.
offered some insights on that even though they are worded in a somewhat critical manner, they have been well received, even though they're not necessarily happy news.
Mhm.
They're informative and give people a path to the light at the end of the tunnel.
Mhm.
So hopefully we can have more of that as this goes on.
Yeah, I really hope so. Okay, so there I'm gonna just touch back on like one other question. You might have already kind of answered this and like what we've talked about already, but I just want to make sure that you didn't have anything else you wanted to add to it. So the question was, is there anything else you feel like you want to discuss in the interview? You answered how to have a regular dating life as a Christian and how Christians can navigate the current dating market. So do you feel like you kind of answered that or do you want to add anything else to it?
I do think we have gone over a lot of that and elaborated on a lot of that very thoroughly over the course of our conversation. One thing that I would like to elucidate back to is this whole thing of being fish cognizant of the water they're swimming in.
Mm.
And a big part of the water we're swimming in is social media.
Mhm.
And I think it would do a lot to recognize the kind of effect that social media is having on us cognitively and how as I heard one speaker put it, our technology has outpaced our natural development in a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
ways. We were not we're not neurologically engineered for this much connection
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways. And it's like we're being over connected, over informed, overstimulated with all this information glut coming our way. And the kinds of things that it's doing to our expectations in the dating arena. Because of all this pressure that we've been put on us by previous generations, we're expected to get something like cataclysmically transcendent through our dating and mating experiences. Like, unless I have something akin to a road to Damascus experience with this person, they are not the one for me. I find, and that I think is the byproduct of so much of the pressure that we're put on. But
Mm-hmm.
even with people like in my general age bracket who have had successful marriages and relationships, those did not start off like something out of a Hallmark movie.
Right.
Okay. One of my best friends, her name is Kelly. She lives with her husband down in Virginia Beach. Okay. She and her husband met in a DM on hotornot.com.
No, really?
I'm not kidding. They met in a DM on hotornot.com. They just chatted back and forth about that. They maybe video chatted a couple of times. And I think just out of the blue, Mike, her husband, just out of the blue said, you know what, with all of the problems that we seem to be having, we could solve a lot of them if we just got married. And she said, like, yeah, why don't we do that? Let's just get married. It was as casual a decision as that. Just last
Wow.
November, they celebrated 21 years of marriage.
Dang.
So
Wow.
that wasn't anything transcendent or magical or anything out of a dang Disney movie. Look, I'm a 90s kid. I watched the same Disney movies you did. My thinking about love has been warped in the exact same ways that yours have. Maybe
Yeah.
not, maybe from a different angle, but the thinking is there. Like the whole thing about, getting a girlfriend just by being nice. That doesn't
Yeah.
work. I
Yeah.
think every young man learns the hard way that being nice to a girl is not going to make her attracted to you. It may make you admirable, it may make you a good friend, it may make you safe and comfortable. But again, virtue and attraction, not the same thing.
Mm,
So, with that said, it would do well for all of us, men and women, because I do think that social media affects our expectations in different ways.
right.
Sexist. It seems to give men the delusion that they can always get better or more, I should say. It gives men the delusion they can always get more. It gives women the delusion they can always get better. And
Hmm.
that ties in very much with our basic physiology
Okay.
because when it comes to mating, this is general across species that the primary female concern about sex is quality, whereas the primary male concern about sex is quantity.
Mm.
And this is not just true with humans. That's why I think polygamy was legitimized for a long time, even in biblical times. You had things like, King David having 7 wives, King Solomon having 700 wives and 300 concubines. And that was seen as legitimate because it was complementary in a way. Now, let me be clear here. I'm not advocating a return to polygamy for the love of God. But I am saying that it does seem that that arrangement was functional for its time because it ties in with just the way our bodies operate with regard to sex. In a
Mm-hmm.
given month, the average man's body produces, I'm going to get a little bit technical here and maybe a little frank. The
Go
average
for it.
man's the average man's body produces literally billions of sperm cells
Mm-hmm.
over the course of any given month, capable of impregnating many, many, many women at a time. I think I saw somewhere on the Animal Planet they were talking about this, and they said that every time a man makes love to a woman and releases, what he releases is literally theoretically potent enough to impregnate the entire female population of the continent of Europe.
Jeez.
That's how much is released. To put it another way, the entire human population of the globe could be doubled by only 23 men.
Wow.
Right. That's one of the reasons why we find that any kind of job or occupation that has that innately entails high risk to life and limb is almost always male dominated.
Mm-hmm.
Men, generally speaking, now this is just a hard fact, and I've learned to make my peace with this. We are the disposable sex, meaning the human race can carry on more comfortably with fewer men than it can with fewer women. I say that with
Mm.
the same tone of voice as I say penguins are flightless birds. It's just a
Right.
fact of nature.
Yeah.
No point getting mad about it. I'm not blaming anybody for it. It's not anybody's fault. It is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
In a similar way, in a given month, the average woman's body only produces one fertilizable egg that
Mm-hmm.
can only get impregnated by one man.
Mm-hmm.
So Women's physiology is engineered to prioritize quality because the best chance she has of her children surviving to sexual maturity is by picking the highest quality man that she can find.
Mm.
The one whose genes seem to be most suited for survivability in a variety of ways. Whereas for men, most of us don't actually make it to the goal of mating. This is another hard fact that we've had to learn. We've completed the study of the human genome.
Right.
And one of the things that has revealed is that something like 87% of the female side of our species has successfully mated over the course of the history of our species. Only about 47% of the male side of our species has successfully mated. Okay. You look at anybody's family tree, you'll see roughly twice as many female ancestors as you will male ancestors. That's just reflective of that. So I think there's something base and primal in the minds of men that recognizes that when it comes to the goal of mating, most of us are not going to make it. And that, I think, does fuel a lot of like neediness and desperation and pursuit, why the sexual impulse in a lot of men seems to be more of a drive, whereas in women it's more akin to a mood. As many people say. I've heard some people put it like a man's sexual impulse is more like a light switch, whereas for a woman it's more like a dial. It's for that reason. The woman only needs the dial because her biology is engineered to find the highest quality option she can get. The man's instinct is just to get as many as he can, as quick as he can, because he doesn't have a lot of time, and it's more likely than not he's not going to make it. So that's why I think the social media, going back to why how social media has affected us differently, why it seems to have given men this delusion that they can always get more and women the delusion that they can always get better. And that produces very unhealthy expectations that serves as another Charlie horse to our ambitions in mating and dating and marriage that we're supposed to be pursuing.
It's very interesting. I'm going to have so many things to think about after this.
My world.
I mean, I like to sit and like, obviously, I like to sit and have conversations and like then like suss out all the things and think about all the stuff. So thank you for giving me a bazillion different things to think about. Alrighty, well, I say we just wrap this up because we're over an hour and that was a great conversation. Do you have any last minute like things you want to throw in? If not, it's totally fine.
Well, I suppose I can plug in where people can find me online.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, certainly. So on Facebook, I go by the name Tyrone Barnes. I don't know where you post. Do you post this on like Spotify or iTunes or whatever?
It's gonna be on all the things.
Okay,
Spotify, yeah, YouTube,
cool.
Apple, all the things.
Okay, so I'm Tyrone Barnes in the 824 group. I go by the username SYCROSD, the number 4, or CyclosD4, pretty much everywhere else on the internet. Instagram, X, DeviantArt. Like I said, I'm an artist, ArtStation, whatever the case. You just type that into Google, you'll find me in a variety of places. But yeah, I should be pretty easy to find from just the link that you post with this episode.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. And yay for being the first man of What Men Think. So I thank you.
Oh, snap. I'm the first.
Yep, you're the first.
That's quite a mantle to hold up. But
So,
hey, I'm supposed to have a date scheduled next Friday, in fact. So we'll see what happens after that with everything that we've just discussed in tow.
heck yeah, you'll have to keep me posted.
I will.
Alrighty. Hey, thanks for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the stories and the perspectives that were shared in this episode. Please share it with a friend whose dating life might need some help. Wink, wink. If you want to connect with me on social media, you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at anepiphwithtiff. I really hope to see you there. There are multiple ways that you can support my show. You can pray for me, rate, review, and share any episode that you love. Or you can even financially contribute by going to patreon.com/anepiphany with Tiffany. Until next time, I'm Tiffany, and I hope you just had an epiphany.